Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the program. Today we're going to look at Rome's history of immigration through this genetic study. This is one of those things where I always kind of knew in the back of my mind where those genetics went beyond 8,000, 9,000 years ago. But just to have it spelled out like this is pretty interesting. There are probably a lot of points in this article that are heavily disputed, and some people could argue that they might be assumptions, but either way, it's pretty interesting just to discuss some of the stuff that they bring up. And it's from Archaeology magazine. It's kind of a short synopsis of another study, which I'll have a link to. So what they did was they analyzed the genomes of 127 people who were buried at 29 different archaeological sites around Rome, spanning from modern times to 12,000 years ago. And what they found was pretty interesting. So the first iteration of the Roman people, I suppose, dating to 12,000, 9,000 years ago. So again, right in that Younger Dryas tumultuous period, those genetics go back to the hunter-gatherers. During that time, there were hunter-gatherers all over Europe. And by hunter-gatherers, it could just mean, if you don't want to make that assumption, you can just say the inhabitants of Europe at the time. So we're looking just strictly here at this part of the Mediterranean Sea and this part of the I guess the peninsula, you could say. 12,000 to 9,000 years ago would have been that period when the Mediterranean basin was a lot more shallow, and it was transitioning to what it is now. And if you were to believe Plato's, I guess, his account of Atlantis, it would be, from what he describes in the Timaeus and the Critias, it's over here. This is the Strait of Gibraltar, aka the Pillars of Heracles. This is Greece, where Plato is from. So beyond the Pillars of Heracles, you'll get to some islands, and then you'll get to more islands, and then you'll get to, I guess, what's assumed to be some part around here, the Azores. Some people think it's the Azores. Some people think it's not. Either way, I'm trying to put things into context. That was kind of like an aside there. So the genetics in Rome at the time resembled of those of other hunter-gatherers in Europe. And so the people in Europe, I did an episode on the Scythians, and there was a time when there was just a huge tribe stretching from west, or culture rather, some sort of loose affiliated culture that are known as the Scythians and other types of barbarians, depending on who you ask, all the way here, all the way toward east of the Danube, somewhere around here. Those genetics are probably the same ones, I think, although I think they're more from the steppe. There might have been an indigenous group of people here, I'm not sure exactly, but the whole this whole statement here, the other hunter-gatherers in Europe 12,000, 9,000 years ago, in terms of genetics, that's a hot button issue in and of itself. But for the sake of this discussion, this episode, we'll just go with what they say here. We'll just take for granted that they're hunter-gatherers. But then it also, their early genetics reflect those of the people who came from Anatolia. So I did an episode on that too, that there seemed to have been some sort of spread of ideas, agriculture and genetics from Göbekli Tepe and modern day Turkey. From 900 to 200 BC, as the city grew, obviously the genomes become to reflect those from the Middle East and further parts of Africa. And when it became an empire, the genetic diversity was even more overwhelming. You can kind of think of it like America now. There's all kinds of different DNA strands from all over the globe. This is kind of on a smaller scale, but all over the old world. So Greece, Syria, Lebanon, Europe, North Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, the Middle East, all these places, all these genetics were coming and going. And then when the population decreased, when the Roman Empire starts to collapse, when the capital shifts to Constantinople, invasions, epidemics, again, invasions from the Gauls or the Celts, however you want to describe them, the Goths, they all come from some root culture. They came, and their genetics may have been what I was describing before, the quote, hunter-gatherers pre-Ice Age or around the Younger Dryas period. 12,000 to 9,000 years ago. Whoever was living there, they might have been the precursors to the Celts and stuff like that. But that's a hot button issue. Rome's population, once again, by the Middle Ages, resembled that of other parts of Europe. So that genetic diversity somehow during the Middle Ages, again, there's a lot going on, invasions and the plague and all kinds of other epidemics. So a large amount of that genome gets killed off, and then I guess repopulated with more genetics from Europe, which makes sense. It follows the historical account as well. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about that, what you know about the genetics here. I know that there are, if you talk about Sicily and some of the islands on the Mediterranean that were part of the Roman Empire but not part of the mainland, their genetics are even more diversified, especially in Sicily, because that used to be part of Carthage as well. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about the Mediterranean. Even I mentioned Atlantis a little bit. You guys could discuss about that too. Anything at all about this, let me know, and I'll talk to you guys later.